We're right at a week away from Memorial Day, and college football doesn't start till the end of the summer, right around Labor Day. But that doesn't mean we can't start talking some college football right here and right now. You know why? Because last week CBS unveiled their ranking of all 65 Power Conference coaches, and that is some juicy dripping off-season content. Where does Mack Brown rank on that list? Oh, you better believe we're unpacking that on today's episode of Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast. I'm your host, Isaac Schade, beat writer for Sports Illustrated's All Tar Heels website. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or your first watch every single day. It is a joy to bring to you the very best and only daily content for the Tar Heels out there in all of podcast land. Hey, if you would, wherever you get your podcasts, would you subscribe to the show? If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, smash the like button. We want to make sure you're here. And then this is going to be a good episode to drop in some comments along the way. A couple pieces of housekeeping for us today, right off the top. For those of you watching, you'll notice that I'm wearing this snazzy Chapel Hill shirt. It looks like one of those cool postcards you get when somebody's away. And it says, "Greetings from Chapel Hill." It's got the great one right here on it. And it says, "Where the legend began." You know that's right. And right here in this great cursive at the bottom, it says R. Lamar. And so I'm rocking a shirt from my man R. Lamar today. Just want to give him a shout out and all his great merch. This t-shirt is super comfortable. So make sure you go check out his great content. Also, typically I'm not wearing a hat. I'm wearing a hat today. My hair's all floofy, if you can see it. This hat is from my son's Little League team, his T-ball team, Webb City. That's Webb City High School's colors, that red and Columbia blue, they call it. And so I'm his T-ball coach, and we had a game tonight. And so I thought, hey, you know, why don't we just get a little shout out to my son's T-ball team? And so that's why I'm rocking that. I'm going to turn it backwards so that the light doesn't, you want to see my beautiful eyeballs, right? If you're watching, if you're listening, you don't care at all. Hey, friends, speaking of giving some shout outs to people, if you're somebody that's on Twitter, I just want to shout out our good friends at the Carolina Family. It's at all uppercase, the UNC family. Make sure you go and give them a follow on Twitter. Great content there all the time. Also, it's so fun that we're talking some football today because as I was prepping for today's show, I was watching Forrest Gump. It was on like the Paramount channel. It's such a good movie. I forget and I need to watch it, but it was like right at the scene where Forrest is running for the University of Alabama, and it's so ridiculous playing for Bear Bryant. Love that movie. What's your favorite movie? Would love for you to drop it in the comments and let me know about that. Also, it is Tuesday, and it has been a minute since we've done Tuesday trivia. I apologize, but here's today's Trivia Tuesday question. For a lot of you out there, it's probably going to be pretty easy, but, not everybody will get it. There are 5, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, active college football coaches with a national championship to their name. All you got to do is name who they are. 5 of them. It seems like it should be more than that, but it ain't. There are only 5 active Division I college football coaches with a national championship as a head coach. Who are they? Answer coming up at the end of the show. Okay, as I said, last week CBS Sports came out with this list of the ranking all 65 of the Power Conference college football coaches and Notre Dame. So it's 64 from those 5 major conferences and Notre Dame. And so basically what I want to do today is take time to unpack all this. Where does Mack Brown fall on the list? Is he too high? Is he too low? How could he move up? How would he fall back? Where does the ACC fall? What's conference breakdown? We're going to just unpack several various aspects of it. So let me start by just talking about what they said their rationale is for how they ranked it, because that's always an important thing to do. So here's what they said. As we've done annually, CBS Sports is back ranking the college football coaches of the Power 5 conferences and Notre Dame ahead of the upcoming season. A panel of our experts turned in their ballots with a simple mission: rank the 65 Power 5 coaches from best to worst, so 1 to 65. There are no parameters for how they should be ranked. One could rank strictly on records or accomplishments. Another could rank on what they think these coaches will accomplish or how they have lived up to expectations. There are no rules, only rankings. And so it is a little bit nebulous how they're ranking, but I kind of like that diversity. At first I read that and I'm like, come on, man, come up with a metric or something to help explain this. But in truth, I like what they've done here. And so last Tuesday, so a week ago today, CBS came out with rankings 65 through 26. And personally, I was worried like, I know how these things go. I'm going to look through this list and I'm going to find Coach Brown's name somewhere on it, even if it's at 26, and I am not going to be a happy camper. And so what I like to do when I'm looking at any list of this kind, I start at the lowest. Even if they start at number 1, I scroll to the bottom, find the lowest entry, and then just slowly work my way up till I find whomever it is that I'm looking for. Well, much to my surprise and to my relief, because now I don't have to write a strongly worded letter, Coach Brown was not on this list of 65 to 26. That was great. So then Wednesday, coaches 25 through 1 came out, and I was glad to see that and just know this is a comprehensive list of every major coach, and so that means that Coach Brown is in that top 25, which is good. Now, before I read this list of the top 25, I kind of registered a guess to myself. My wife, I was reading it as my wife and I were headed to New York City for the week. And so I was reading it. So I told her what I thought and said, hey, I think Coach Brown's going to come in somewhere in the low teens on this list. So I look at it. I start at 25 because, like I said, I go from the bottom and scroll up 25, 24, 23, 22, 21. He is at 20th. And so, lower than I thought he would be. But that's where he is. Now, if we're comparing it to where he was on the 2021 list, Coach Brown came in at 12th. And so clearly he has fallen, and we're going to talk about why. Now, here's what CBS had to say about putting Coach Brown at 20th, a little capsule they did about each coach. Mack nearly cracked the top 10 last season after leading North Carolina to the Orange Bowl, but the 2021 season was a disappointment. The Heels finished 6-7 and went 3-5 in the ACC. While Brown is one of the few active coaches with a national title to his name, so there you go. There's one of your answers of the 5, but hopefully you already knew that one. 2005 is a long time ago in the minds of our voters. Plus, since the 2010 season at Texas, Brown's teams have gone only 51-38. That's good enough to get you ranked here on this list, but you're not going to sniff the top 10 with a record like that, end quote. Well, that is critical and direct and to the point, but all accurate and true, and where CBS has landed him. So then my question for myself as I look at this is Mack Brown too high? Is he too low, or just right? He's not too high. I mean, that's obvious. I said my guess is that he would be somewhere in the teens. Is it too low? I mean, it is number 20, so it's not quite, in the 20s, but it's right at the end of that. I would say, it's quibbling, but if I want him in the teens, even if you just move him up 1, I would be more pleased with that. But ultimately, if I've got him in the low teens and they've got him at 20, I've got to say that's just about right. I would have gone higher with him, obviously, if I was putting in votes, but I understand their rationale and I get it and it makes sense. Now, I would say I think Coach Brown's years at ESPN probably hurt him in the eyes of some of these voters, right? You've got all these great years at North Carolina 1.0 and then at Texas, and then you stop and take this hiatus to go work at ESPN for quite a while. And I think had he stayed at Texas, his numbers would have been even more established, more wins, a higher winning percentage overall. But it is what it is, and that's where he falls. And ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's just a list for a great offseason conversation. Even as it is, though, listen to some of these numbers. This came out on Carolina football's social media yesterday on Monday. Coach Brown is number 2 in all-time wins amongst active coaches. So think of every active coach in D1. He's number 2 on that list. Can you imagine what that number would be had he not taken those years off? He is the only active Hall of Fame coach, and that obviously is due in part to him not being a coach anymore, and so he was voted in. As we've already said, one of just 5 active coaches with a national championship. So again, I'm giving you one of the answers there. You got to figure out the other 4. He is a 2-time National Coach of the Year and has produced 137 NFL draft picks in his time as a head coach. And so, great numbers there for Coach Brown. Again, would I move him up higher on this list? Yes, but again, the list is pretty arbitrary, and I think recency bias plays a factor in having him down at 20th. And I'll say a little bit more about that here in just a moment. Because in the next segment, what I want to look at is what could happen in the upcoming 2022 season that would either move him up on this list for next year or move him down on the list for next year. And so, where do you think he's going to go? I'm curious. You let me know in the comments which direction you think he will move next year. But before we do that, let me tell you a little bit about BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including the basketball playoffs, which are getting close to the end there. We've almost got the NBA Finals set, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Hey, I also want to encourage you, for those of you who want to hear more than just about the Tar Heels, we have a daily podcast at Locked On that is about all sports. And so I want to encourage you to check out Locked On Sports today. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. All of this is available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, just like those of you who are watching, and wherever it is that you get podcasts. Make sure you dial in to that. All right, so we see that Mack Brown is 20th on this list. Remember that last year he was 12th. What would happen in this upcoming 2022 season that would either move him up for 2023 on this list or down for 2023 on the list? Well, let me first start by saying the big jump in 2020 was great, but ultimately it was too much too soon. You've got Sam Howell that takes this big leap from freshman to sophomore year. You've got all these NFL skills players around him, and it's just the right fit. And so there was a huge jump from Mack Brown's first year back in Chapel Hill to Mack Brown's second year Chapel Hill. But then last year, it kind of tapered back off to what you would have really kind of probably expected year 2 to be. And so that jump from 2019 to 20 didn't follow typical or normal progressions as you're building a program. And that's ultimately what allowed Coach Brown to jump up to 12 on this CBS list last year. And then obviously the subpar performance that we just had in 2021 is what dropped him to 20th on the list this year, probably lower than he deserves. Again, I think there's some recency bias baked into that. I think it's also against expectations when you're getting Sam Howell back, even though you've lost all these other skill players. The national media is just expecting the team, to have another phenomenal year. But it was just too much too soon. And imagine with me, if you will, that we flip-flop those seasons, and the 6 and 7 season happened in 2020, and then the Orange Bowl season happened in 2021. You got to think that Mack Brown is top 10 on this list this year, just based on that 3-year progression of moving up. So I think that's what plays into where he is and why he is at 20th on the list this year. Now, if we think about what would move him up from 20th, very simply, a winning record this season. Why is that? Well, again, after last season and what happened, national expectations are pretty low across the board. Not expecting Carolina to be nearly what they were expected to be last year, at top 5 or 10 nationally. And so very simply, a winning season coming off of what they did last year moves Coach Brown up on this list next year. Again, losing Sam Howell, that also means that expectations nationally are pretty low this year. Oh, you lost somebody the caliber of Sam Howell, you're not going to be as great this year. You're replacing your defensive coordinator. You've got a new scheme along with that. And so again, expectations are low nationally because of all sorts of things like that. Losing Sam Howell, new defense, not great season last year. And so Mack Brown gets a winning season this year. He moves up on this list. Now, what contributes to that? If North Carolina is going to have a winning season in 2022, that means a couple things like this. You got to win the games you're supposed to win. That includes, for my money, going 3-0 right out of the gate because you're facing lesser opponents. In week 0 at home, you've got Florida A&M, should be a relatively easy win. Week 2 is a tough game at App State, but the national perception is that North Carolina should go to App State and win that game pretty handily. It's not going to matter the score when we're talking about a ranking of how Coach Brown has done. You just got to win the game. And then week 3 at Georgia State, another true road game. You got to go 3-0 in those games. And then when we look at the other home games, other than Florida A&M, you've got Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and NC State. For me, Carolina needs to be 4-1 in those games, or at worst 3-2. I would imagine when you look at this list, Notre Dame is the most obvious candidate that you lose to, and so that means that you got to win those final 4 remaining games at home. Maybe you could drop one of them and still be okay. And then in terms of the road games, not counting App State or Georgia State, you've got 4 more road games at Miami, at Duke, at Virginia, and at Wake Forest. I would say, again, if we're talking about what does Mack Brown need to do to move up on this CBS list next year, I think you need to go 500 in those, 2-2. At least. Obviously, it's bonus if you do better than that. But if you start off 3-0 against those lesser opponents, go 4-1 or 3-2 in your other home games, and then 2-2 in your other road games, that gives you 3, 6 or 7, and then 8 or 9. So you're looking at 9 to 10 wins if you can do that with just 3 to 4 losses. And obviously that's a great record. And when you compare that to last year's 6 and 7, it's like, whew, that is a big jump. But it doesn't take much. Why? Here are some other things that a winning season would include. There's just these little things that Carolina didn't capitalize on last year that maybe even 2 of those go differently. And instead of 6 and 7, you're the flip-flop, 7 and 6, or even 8 and 5. I don't think it would have taken much. And then last year is perceived wholly differently. And so you do all these things, you make it to a bowl game, and then why not go and win that blessed thing? And so a solid season for the Tar Heels, I would say, moves Mack Brown into the mid-teens on the CBS next year. A phenomenal season I would say, push him into top 10 contention as we think about it. Now, on the flip side, what would move him down on this list? Well, very simply, repeat last year, have another losing season. I would say that Coach Brown gets a little bit of a pass because of his resume. And so one down year last doesn't hurt him all that much, right? He's still ranked 20th coming into this year on this list. But 2 in a row of those types of seasons, and you're going to fall. And so that would be unwise. Now, what would cause that to happen another season like last year? Well, ultimately, I think a lot of that would be quarterback. Neither of the quarterbacks currently in contention rises to the occasion, or the Tar Heels try to balance a 2-quarterback system, and it just doesn't go well. The new defensive scheme just takes too long to gel, and by the time Carolina figures it out, it's too late in the season. Or once again, maybe the close calls don't go Carolina's way. They don't make the winning plays late in games that they need to. And it's those kind of things that could add up to repeating last season. And so with another season like last year, I think that is what would make Mack Brown fall on this CBS list as we look at next year. Now, you're asking me for my assessment? I think we're looking at a much improved season this year, specifically just in terms of wins and losses. Yes, it's a new defense, but it's a defense that allows players to make plays. Yes, you're replacing the best quarterback in program history. You got some great guys ready and capable of filling those shoes who are going to be pushing each other. I think the things that need to happen are going to happen, and we see Coach Brown jump on this CBS list ahead of next year. Now, what we haven't done yet, we've only been talking about where Carolina is at and where Coach Brown is at on this list. What about the rest of the ACC? Where do those schools fall on this list of rankings from CBS? And then also, what about conference affiliation? Which conference has the most teams in the top 25 on CBS's list? It's not the conference you might think it is. Who is it? We're going to talk about it in just a moment. But first, here are a couple ads for you. Okay, we are back. I want to start in just our last segment of the day by looking at where all 15 ACC schools land on this list. And when I say 15, obviously that means then that I'm including Notre Dame in the list. And so you hear all that. So we're going to start at the end and work our way forward towards the highest ACC team on the list. So lowest, and actually the last team on the list, is Virginia Tech at 65th. Duke at 64th, and Virginia at 60th. Now, that means that 3 of the 15 ACC teams are 3 of the 6 lowest teams, but that's all ultimately because they all 3 had a coaching change. And as you look at the list, if you go look up CBS's rankings, all the teams down at the bottom are teams that made a coaching change, especially those that have first-year head coaches who have never been a head coach at the D1 level before. And so understandable with those being down there. Now, as we keep working our way through, Georgia Tech comes in at 58th and Syracuse at 56th. And so when you look at that, that means that in the bottom 10 of this list, so 56 to 65, the ACC occupies half of the bottom 10 teams on this list. That's not great for conference longevity or capability at the highest level, but it is what it is, and we got to keep moving forward. Now, next on the list for the ACC, Notre Dame comes in at 49th. Keep in mind, Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame's new coach, has only coached one game. He coached them in their bowl game and was given a little bit of a pass all the way up to 49th there. I think that's more about Notre Dame than it is about Marcus Freeman. And I know this is a list about coaches, but there's the Notre Dame media bias coming through once again. All right, 2 other ACC teams in the 40s. That's FSU at 47. Boy, that's crazy that FSU is that low. But that's where we're at. They haven't been FSU for the last bit. And then Louisville comes in at 43 on this list. Moving our way, there's only one team in the 30s, and that's Boston College. That's great for BC to be way up there. And then got a couple teams in the 20s, but I'm just going to say one of them right now because it's the last one before we hit the top 25, and that's Pitt coming in at 27th. So it's interesting when we look at where these head coaches are ranked. We've got Notre Dame, Florida State, Louisville lower than you might think, just based on history, and then teams like Pitt and Boston College higher than you typically might think. Now, that is 10 of the 15 ACC teams outside the top 25, and that's good. That means the ACC has 5 teams left in the top 25. We already know that Mack Brown is at 20th. There is one other team a little bit lower than them in the top 25, and that's NC State coming in there. And then as we move into the top 20, Mario Cristobal at Miami is 19th. Dave Clawson at Wake Forest is 17th. Wow, did you think he would be that high? I sure didn't, but there he is. And then the highest ranked ACC head coach, as you would guess, is none other than Dabo Swinney, who is number 3 on this list, behind only, any guesses? That's right, Alabama at 1 and Georgia at 2. So what about conference affiliation? We've looked at where the 15 ACC schools are. I want to look at, of these 5 major conferences, who has the most within the top 25. Well, the ACC is 4th out of the 5 power conferences on the list, and so the lowest is the Pac-12. Pac-12 only has 2 teams, head coaches ranked in the top 25, and that would the highest on that list is USC at 4. Next, then, as I said, is I looked at my numbers wrong here. ACC is actually smack dab in the middle at 3rd. Pac-12 has the fewest, and then Big 12 has the second fewest. They're 4th on the list. They have 3 teams, the highest ranked of which is Oklahoma State, coming in at 10th. And then those 3 teams, though, are jumbled all right together, 10, 11, 12. That's Oklahoma State at 10, Baylor at 11, and Iowa State at 12. So nice job by those head coaches. They're led by Coach Gundy at 10th for the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Interesting that a Big 12 school, the highest ranked is 10th, but that's what it is. Now, as I alluded to, the team that you might, or the conference you might think is the highest ranked on this list, not highest ranked, has the most head coaches in the top 25, is not who you think it is. If you've been keeping tabs, Pac-12 is the lowest, Big 12 is the next lowest, then the ACC. That means that all is left is SEC and Big 10. And as you would guess, by the way, I've been talking about it and saying it's not who you think it is, the SEC does not have the most head coaches in this list. It is the Big 10. So the SEC, though, does have the most loaded top end. They have 7 teams in all, 7 head coaches in all in the top 25, headlined obviously by Nick Saban at number 1 and then Kirby Smart at number 2. But in all, the SEC has 3 of the top 5 head coaches and then 4 of the top 7. And so while the Big 10 might have more, the SEC is more top heavy. Right, and then it comes to the Big 10, who does, as I said, have 8 of their 14 head coaches in the top 25 here, headlined by Ohio State at 6. And so that full list, again, you've got Pac-12 with 2 head coaches in the top 25, Big 12 with 3, ACC with 5, SEC with 7, but is the most top-loaded, and then the Big 10 has 8. So, really interesting list. Again, all it is just a fun list that just gives us an opportunity to have a conversation about where coaches are ranked and where they should be ranked. Would love to hear your thoughts on where Mack Brown is on this list and if you think he should be lower, higher, is he just right, was he snubbed, all of that kind of conversation. Now, it is time, drum roll please, for the Tuesday trivia answer. 5 active college football coaches have won a national championship at the D1 level. Who are they? Well, I've already given you Mack Brown, and then that means there are 4 others. You're probably already saying it at home, but the 2, I would imagine, next most obvious ones are Nick Saban at Alabama and Dabo Swinney at Clemson. You know, they've just had this run of back and forth, playing in the championship game off and on. And then maybe the person that came to your mind first, because they're the most recent national champions, is Kirby Smart, who won at Georgia. And then the little bit of the tricky one is Jimbo Fisher, because he won it not with his current school, Texas A&M, he actually won it when he was at Florida State with, who was the quarterback? Jameis Shrimp Winston. That is right. So there is your Tuesday trivia answer. 5 active college football coaches who've won a national championship. Mack Brown, Dabo Swinney, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, and Jimbo Fisher. Great list. Great fun conversation today. Love having these. And hope you enjoyed a little bit of some college football banter here towards the end of May. Obviously, there will be a lot more of this as the offseason goes. And that brings us to an end of today's show of Locked On Tar Heels. Coming up tomorrow, Coach Pack Kilby and I are going to unpack another player. This is a recruit who's actually not a Tar Heel yet, but is someone that a lot of people think will ultimately commit to the Tar Heels. And so we just want to cast some vision onto that, and that is Matas Buzelis. Really excited to dive into him with Coach Kilby, and that'll be great. By the way, I'll say this again on tomorrow's show. We have heard you loud and clear. We are not calling him the Carolina Coach K anymore. Wow. People are big mad about that, and I apologize. Hey, thanks so much for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen every day. Please go subscribe to the show everywhere you listen to podcasts, or if you're watching, hit subscribe on YouTube, smash the like button, leave a comment. Would love to hear your thoughts. Hit that bell so you get notifications every time a new episode drops. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Heels. You can follow me on Twitter at Isaac Schade, ISAACSCHADE. And remember, if you would, go follow the UNC family at the UNC family. Now that you've made this your first listen, let me encourage you to make Locked On NBA Big Board Podcast your second listen of the day. Rafael Barlow, Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin give fans an in-depth look into the biggest prospects, the latest player rankings, and of course, big boards. Yes. So, NBA Big Boards, and listen to it every day on the Odyssey app or on YouTube or wherever it is that you get podcasts. And as always, free just for you. Thanks so much for spending part of your Tuesday hanging out with me, talking about Mack Brown. What a great coach he is. Absolutely, he should be in the top 20, right? Top 15, maybe even top 10. Well, got to win this year. Got to prove it a little bit more. Regardless of what happens on the field, you got to know it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Until tomorrow, peace!